In a world where appearances can open doors or slam them shut, one brief encounter can unravel a lifetime of judgment. Picture a bright, talented black woman stepping into a sleek corporate office for a job interview that should have been her shining moment. Instead, a panel of sneering faces, laced with hidden biases, turned her ambition into humiliation. Little did they know she was no mere candidate on their checklist. Her husband, as it happened, was the company's CEO, and the walls of arrogance were about to crumble. Stay with me as we delve into a story of betrayal, redemption, and unexpected karma. One that'll leave you speechless. Ebony Daniels. Richardson had always been ambitious. She was born in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of Chicago, growing up in an old townhouse that saw too many winters without proper heating. Yet in that tiny living room, Ebony found her vast imagination. She would often sit on the threadbare carpet and leaf through her mother's tattered old magazines, marveling at women in fitted suits and reading stories of powerful business leaders who seemed to run entire industries with a single handshake. She decided at a young age that she'd one day join their ranks and break her own glass ceilings. Her mother, Tasha Daniels, worked long hours as a nurse at John H. Stroger Jr. Hospital of Cook County. Money was tight, but the house was rich in love and lessons. Tasha would always remind Ebony that her skin color was a gift and her heritage a source of pride, a treasure trove of resilience, creativity, and strength. Tasha's father, Ebony's grandfather, had marched in civil rights protests decades earlier. The image of him in a black and white photo holding a protest sign engraved itself in Ebony's mind. It fueled her spirit, reminding her that success was often hard-fought, but worth every challenge. Growing up, Ebony took every opportunity she could find. She was a scholarship student at a local private high school, where she excelled in speech club and debate team. Later, she got admitted to Northwestern University, majoring in marketing and organizational leadership. Her laser-like focus and natural aptitude for communication helped her sail through her coursework. During summer breaks, she completed internships at reputable companies like Starbucks and smaller marketing agencies, often outshining her peers. Professors, mentors, and even CEOs at networking events recognized her charisma and potential. Still, Ebony was aware that prejudice lurked in boardrooms and behind polished HR desks. She'd experienced microaggressions from raised eyebrows over her braided hairstyles to awkward assumptions about her upbringing or skill set. Yet Ebony never wavered. Each bias, each offhand remark, only magnified her resolve to thrive in corporate America. While Ebony was starting her career, she crossed paths with a dynamic and forward-thinking entrepreneur named Maxwell Max Richardson at a tech conference in Seattle. He was the keynote speaker, the recently minted CEO of Caldwell Industries, a rising company that specialized in sustainable solutions from eco-friendly packaging to energy-efficient industrial equipment. He radiated ambition, but also compassion. Maxwell was known for championing equal opportunity hiring and pushing diversity as not just a moral imperative, but a business advantage. Ebony was fascinated. For his part, Maxwell was captivated by Ebony's fearless questions during the Q&A session. She challenged his statistics on consumer feedback, and instead of bristling at her critique, Maxwell recognized a brilliant mind. He introduced himself after the conference, and a spark ignited that would soon grow into a flame. Fast forward through months of coffee dates, countless phone calls, cross-country flights, and gradually, Ebony and Maxwell became inseparable. They were married in a small, intimate ceremony with Ebony's mother standing proudly in the front row. Maxwell's side of the family, wealthy and somewhat conservative, initially had reservations about Ebony, but she won them over with grace and brilliance. Ebony adored Maxwell's passion for social impact and his pragmatic approach to scaling Caldwell Industries. However, she never wanted to be seen merely as the CEO's wife. She pursued her own path, building an impressive resume in brand strategy and marketing across several industries. She was determined to stand on her own merits, her skills and creativity. And so when she heard about an exciting position open for a head of marketing at a prominent luxury retail company called Van Doren and Smith Ebony, decided to apply. Of course, Maxwell knew the company's top leadership CEOs in different industries often do, but Ebony insisted on anonymity. She wanted a fair shot at the role. No fancy introduction, no mention of Maxwell. She simply wanted to see if she could land the job with her credentials. Ebony looked forward to stepping outside Caldwell Industries' sphere, forging her own corporate identity and continuing her personal journey. Little did she know her life was about to take a turn she never saw coming. One autumn morning, Ebony's phone buzzed with an email notification. Her heart pounded as she read Dear Ms. Dear Daniels Richardson, we are pleased to inform you that your application to the head of marketing position has been shortlisted for an in-person interview at Van Doren and Smith's corporate headquarters. She let out a joyful laugh. The position was a big deal, leading a marketing team at one of the oldest and most prestigious luxury retail brands in America. Ebony jumped from her chair, nearly spilling her mug of green tea as she rushed to show the email to Maxwell. He hugged her tightly, beaming with pride. He also reminded her that if she ever needed a reference, she could simply mention his name. After all, he had connections that could effortlessly open the door. But Ebony shook her head. I want to do this on my own, she insisted. No handouts, no special favors. I need to prove that I can stand on my own 2 feet, like I always have. Maxwell smiled. I respect that. But don't forget, I'm always here for you if you need me, he said, before going off to a board meeting. Ebony appreciated his unconditional support. She spent the rest of the day researching Van Doren and Smith, refining her knowledge of their history and brand ethos. Founded in 1923 by 2 visionaries, Thomas Van Doren and Linda Smith, the company had grown from a small boutique store in Manhattan into a worldwide luxury chain. Despite the company's prestige, Ebony had heard whispers that its corporate culture wasn't the friendliest. Some employees complained about elitist attitudes in the upper ranks, and there were rumors of subtle discrimination for those who didn't fit the profile. Ebony shrugged those rumors off. Every large corporation had pockets of bias. She had conquered far tougher obstacles in her journey. She was a Daniels by blood, after all. Her mother had taught her never to walk away from a challenge just because it looked daunting. The morning of the interview arrived with a crisp chill in the air. Ebony could feel the flutter of excitement and nerves dancing in her stomach. She chose an elegant, yet understated black pantsuit that complemented her figure and wore her braided hair in a sleek, pulled-back style. She paired the outfit with subtle gold earrings that Maxwell had gifted her on their anniversary. After a quick check in the mirror, Ebony felt composed and confident. This was her day, she thought. The drive into downtown Chicago was bustling with traffic, and Ebony used the time to mentally rehearse her talking points. She had meticulously studied Van Doren and Smith's marketing campaigns, both the successful ones and the less remarkable. She had fresh ideas, a vision to revitalize their digital presence and new angles to appeal to younger demographics without alienating the older clientele that had long supported the brand. When she arrived at the towering glass building, Ebony paused at the grand entrance. The marble floors, the gilded logo, the well-dressed employees hurrying in and out. It all felt both thrilling and a bit intimidating. She was the next in line to walk through those doors, hopefully as a future marketing head. With a steadying breath, Ebony squared her shoulders and stepped inside, not realizing that this day would unfold in ways she could never have anticipated. Inside the lobby, Ebony approached the reception desk where a young woman wearing a tailored grey suit stood with a friendly smile. "Hello. I'm here for an interview with the hiring manager for the head of marketing position." Ebony said, her voice calm and clear. The woman behind the desk asked for her ID, which Ebony provided, then directed her to the 34th floor. Riding the elevator, Ebony couldn't help but notice the occasional glance from other riders. Was it just her imagination, or did some of them look a bit too curious, a bit too dismissive? Ebony brushed it off, reminding herself that she was perfectly qualified, had a stellar resume, and carried herself with dignity. This was just another step in her career, albeit a big one. When she arrived at the 34th floor, she was met by a stark contrast to the elegant lobby. The environment felt cooler, more restrained, almost unwelcoming. The receptionist on this floor glanced at Ebony with a mixture of curiosity and aloofness. "I'm Ebony Daniels Richardson here for the 10 a.m. interview for the head of marketing." Ebony reiterated politely. The receptionist nodded and asked Ebony to have a seat in a nearby waiting area. Minutes ticked by. Ebony noted the time on the wall clock, 9:50 a.m. She had arrived early, just as any well-prepared candidate would. The waiting area was furnished with plush chairs and tall potted plants designed to impress. Nevertheless, Ebony could sense an undercurrent of tension. Employees hurrying by gave her fleeting looks, some almost startled, some politely neutral, and a few with blatant suspicion. At 10:15 a.m., a woman with a pinched expression and platinum blonde hair, styled in a no-nonsense bob, approached. She wore a dark green dress suit and carried a clipboard. "Miss Daniels," she said, nearly mispronouncing Ebony's name. Ebony rose from her seat, smiled, and offered her hand. "Yes, I'm Ebony." "We're running late," the woman cut her off. "Follow me to the conference room." Something about her tone raised Ebony's guard. There was no warmth, no courtesy, just a hurry up and let's get this over with vibe. Ebony trailed behind her, trying not to let the woman's abruptness rattle her confidence. They passed rows of glass-walled offices, inside which Ebony saw meticulously dressed employees, some discussing spreadsheets, others on conference calls with clients. The atmosphere felt stiff, like the entire floor was dancing to a rhythm of formality and caution. At the end of the corridor, they reached a large conference room. It boasted a long mahogany table, a projector screen, and several chairs arranged around it. Seated at one side of the table were two men and another woman, all wearing polished suits. The blonde woman gestured for Ebony to sit on the opposite side, then took her own seat next to them. The man in the center, an older gentleman with silver hair, introduced himself as Gregory Crane, the Senior Vice President of Operations. The woman on his right introduced herself as Christina Barnes, the HR manager. The younger man on Gregory's left was William Bill Pierce, the newly appointed Director of Product Development. The introductions were perfunctory. Ebony responded with a polite, confident greeting and handed them copies of her resume and portfolio, even though she had already submitted them electronically. She noticed Bill scanning her name and then tossing the papers aside with a vague half-smile. Ebony didn't like the vibe in the room one bit. Gregory cleared his throat and looked at Ebony. "We have some questions for you, Ms. Daniels." His voice was flat. Ebony nodded, preparing herself. As the interview began, Ebony answered each question with precision, citing her experience at Starbucks as a summer intern, analyzing consumer data, her successful tenure at a smaller marketing firm where she doubled client engagement rates, and her role in conceptualizing major advertising campaigns that garnered industry awards. She leaned on her years of leadership training and her strong educational background from Northwestern. Yet throughout her answers, she noticed subtle negative cues. Bill would smirk or roll his eyes. Christina occasionally whispered to Gregory, sometimes pointing at Ebony's resume. The blonde woman from earlier, whom Ebony found out, was actually the executive assistant named Sylvia, typed notes with an audible sigh, or worse, allowed her eyes to wander around the room as though bored. Ebony felt a twinge of unease, but she kept her composure, maintaining the kind of poised, assured presence that had always served her well. She wasn't new to tough crowds. Finally, Gregory leaned back and rested his clasped hands on the table. "I see you have quite the varied background," he said. "But we are looking for a very specific kind of candidate here at Van Doren and Smith. We're a luxury brand that caters to a sophisticated clientele." Ebony tilted her head. "I understand, sir. My background in marketing, coupled with my understanding of diverse markets, could actually help broaden Van Doren and Smith's reach without losing its core brand identity." Christina interjected abruptly. "But do you really believe you have the right, shall we say, look to represent a legacy luxury brand?" Her eyes flickered to Ebony's hair and dark complexion. Although Ebony wore a sharp pantsuit, it was clear Christina was implying more than just Ebony's clothing style. Ebony's pulse quickened. This was the first time someone had been so brazen about it. Yet Ebony responded calmly. "I believe that luxury and sophistication are about the values a brand exudes: excellence, quality, authenticity. It's not solely about a particular look, but the intelligence and creativity behind it. My portfolio shows I understand this market and can uplift it further." Bill muttered, tapping his pen on the table. He glanced at Gregory. "I'm just concerned that maybe she's biting off more than she can chew. Head of marketing is a big responsibility. Most of our clientele have very particular expectations." Ebony caught the emphasis on our clientele. The temperature in the room felt like it was dropping. She gave them her best professional smile. "I've successfully led campaigns that integrated modern design and classic appeal, bridging generational gaps. That's exactly the kind of forward-thinking approach a legacy brand like Van Doren and Smith can benefit from." Sylvia stopped typing and looked Ebony up and down, letting out a soft, derisive snort. Ebony felt her stomach clench, but she held her ground. In that moment, she sensed that something uglier lay beneath their questions. She couldn't tell if it was her race, her confidence, or just plain prejudice. Nonetheless, Ebony resolved not to let them see her flinch. The interview dragged on. Questions turned more invasive, bordering on personal. Christina asked Ebony about her life outside of work, her hobbies, her social circles. Bill probed her about how she would handle criticism from high-profile clients who might not be used to someone who stands out. Ebony realized that was code for someone who is black. Each time, Ebony responded with unwavering professionalism. She cited examples from her past experiences dealing with picky clients and how her excellent communication skills and empathy resolved potential conflicts. Still, Ebony could see the walls of skepticism and outright bias rising against her. She thought about how easy it would be to casually mention that she was married to Maxwell Richardson, the CEO of Caldwell Industries, a man whose name carried enormous weight in corporate circles. But Ebony remained silent. She wanted to land this job for who she was, not whose wife she was. Her sense of integrity kept her from playing that card. Eventually, Gregory let out a sigh. "Look, Ms. Daniels, it's quite a jump going from your previous roles to head of marketing for Van Doren and Smith. Why don't we consider you for a lower position? First, say, a junior marketing associate, and see how you adapt to our corporate culture. Because, let's be frank, our brand is about tradition and exclusivity." Ebony forced a polite smile. "I applied for the head of marketing position because my credentials align with the role's requirements. I've led teams, managed budgets, strategized high-level campaigns, and I've proven my capabilities. I appreciate your suggestion, but I'm seeking a leadership role. My track record shows I'm ready for it." Christina's eyes narrowed. "That's quite presumptuous," she remarked. "You assume you know our brand better than we do." "No," Ebony answered, "but I'm confident in my ability to learn quickly. Understand your consumer base and execute innovative campaigns that respect Van Doren and Smith's heritage while expanding its reach." Sylvia laughed under her breath. "Sure, you definitely give us some flavor," she commented with thinly veiled sarcasm. She glanced sideways at Bill, who cracked a small grin. Ebony felt a hot flush of anger creeping into her cheeks, but she held her poise, determined not to let them rattle her. She knew that losing her composure would only play into their stereotypes. So she kept her chin high, refusing to stoop to their level. Gregory cleared his throat. "All right, let's cut to the chase," he said, looking Ebony square in the eye. "For us, it's not just about numbers and strategies. It's about fitting into the brand. Our brand is about refinement. We have an image to uphold. I'm not entirely convinced you'd be the right face for Van Doren and Smith's marketing team, at least in a leadership capacity." There it was, the coded language, the message that Ebony simply didn't meet their unspoken criteria. She stared at the three executives and the assistant, each wearing a smug expression. The blatant discrimination was almost suffocating. Ebony had faced prejudice before, but never so openly in a major corporate setting. She took a deep breath, searching for a final note of professionalism. "Well, I appreciate your time and the opportunity to present my ideas," she said, standing up. Her hands trembled slightly, but she steadied them. "I have a wealth of experience, and I believe my results speak for themselves. If you decide to consider me for the role, you know how to reach me." She gathered her portfolio and stepped toward the door, feeling the weight of humiliation and anger pressing on her chest. As Ebony reached for the handle, Christina's sharp voice stopped her. "You know, Christina said before you go, you might want to work on your attitude. Your confidence comes off as arrogance. And trust me, that's not how we operate here." Ebony turned slowly to face her. Something inside Ebony snapped at that moment, fed by frustration and the sting of injustice. But she forced a measured response. Confidence in one's skill set is not arrogance, it's self-assurance. I'm proud of my achievements, and that's precisely what an executive needs to bring to a position like head of marketing. Thank you for your advice." With that, she walked out, her head held high, leaving the panel in tense silence. But the worst was yet to come. Heart pounding, Ebony strode down the corridor, heading back toward the elevator banks. She cursed silently that this interview had spiraled into such a blatant display of discrimination. How could such a prestigious brand house, such toxic attitudes in its leadership? Yet Ebony reminded herself She had handled it as gracefully as possible. She'd spoken her truth and refused to cower. Just as she pressed the elevator button, she heard hurried footsteps behind her. She turned to see Bill Pierce, the director of product development, jogging toward her. He was wearing a forced smile, but his eyes glinted with a strange mix of contempt and amusement. "Hey, Ebony," Bill said in a stage whisper, glancing around to ensure no one else was listening. "Listen, I just wanted to give you a heads up. You're not going to be getting a call back. They don't see you as a good fit. I mean, come on. You saw how they reacted, right?" Ebony nodded, maintaining a controlled expression. "Yes, I'm aware." Bill shrugged, his grin morphing into a sneer. "Between you and me, you should have known better than to apply for a role that's clearly out of your league. Look at you. Did you really think you'd walk in and be accepted in a senior role here? This place isn't exactly a charity, you know." Ebony felt a rush of anger surge through her veins, but she kept it in check. She refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her flustered. "I am more than qualified," she said coolly. "But it seems your organization doesn't appreciate true talent." He leaned in closer. "Talent, sure, but that only gets you so far. It's about presentation, and quite frankly, you don't have it." His voice dripped with condescension. "The sooner you realize that, the better." Ebony's gaze hardened. She didn't take a step back. "I see," she replied, her voice even. "Well, thank you for clarifying." Before Bill could continue with another snide remark, the elevator doors chimed and slid open. Ebony stepped inside. She could feel Bill's eyes on her as the doors closed. Her heart thumped, and she steadied herself against the wall of the elevator, trying not to let the tears that threatened to form come forth. She wouldn't cry here. Not in this building. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maxwell. "How's the interview going?" Ebony stared at the message, not knowing how to respond. She couldn't bear to relay the humiliating experience just yet. After stepping out of the building, Ebony walked briskly down the street. The crisp wind stung her cheeks, but it also felt cleansing, as if blowing away the toxic energy from that interview room. She spotted a nearby cafe, a local branch of Starbucks, and slipped inside, ordering a chamomile tea to soothe her nerves. Sitting in the corner with her warm cup, Ebony finally typed a response to Maxwell. It was tough. "Let's talk about it at home." She sipped her tea, her mind spiraling. She couldn't stop replaying every sneer, every veiled comment in the interview. She had faced discriminatory undertones before, but never something so explicit, so brazen. Ebony clutched her cup, telling herself it was just one door closing. Many others would open. Little did she know the wheel of fate had started turning. And the next time she'd cross paths with Van Doren and Smith would change everything for them, and for her. That evening, Ebony returned home to the penthouse apartment she and Maxwell shared overlooking Lake Michigan. Although Maxwell was wealthy, Ebony had wanted a place that felt more like a home than a showpiece. Their penthouse was elegantly designed but cozy. The walls were painted in warm earth tones, and large windows let in abundant natural light. Ebony made sure the living room was filled with family photos, an extensive bookshelf, and a few statement art pieces celebrating African heritage. Maxwell greeted Ebony at the door, immediately sensing her tension. "Hey," he said softly, pulling her into a gentle embrace. "Tell me what happened." She let out a shaky sigh. "They were unbelievably rude. It was beyond tough questioning. It was God-Max, it was racist. They kept implying I wasn't the right face for their brand, asked about my look. It was awful." Maxwell's brow furrowed, anger flashing in his eyes. "They said that to you," he asked, his voice dangerously calm. Ebony nodded, recounting the interview in detail. Christina's pointed questions, Gregory's passive-aggressive comments about her, fit Bill's blatant condescension, Sylvia's sneering glances. "I never mentioned I was your wife. I didn't want any special advantage. But they treated me like I was nobody." Maxwell's fists clenched, and Ebony could see he was furious. "I can't believe they'd treat you like that. I had no idea Van Doren and Smith would harbor such a toxic environment. I guess corporate glamour can hide some ugly truths," Ebony said, shaking her head. She felt the sting of humiliation all over again. "But what bothers me most is that they're doing this to other people, too. I'm not the first person they've demeaned." Maxwell nodded, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. "I know their CEO, Martin Chase, from a few industry meetups. He always struck me as a bit old school, but I had no idea his leadership let this level of prejudice go unchecked. Even if Martin himself isn't part of it, he's allowing toxic people to run their hiring process. That's just as bad," Ebony said, a trace of frustration creeping into her voice. "I'm trying to decide if I should do something like file a complaint. But I used my credentials, not your name. I wonder if that might limit my options." Maxwell gently guided Ebony to the sofa where they sat down together. "If you want to file a formal complaint, I'm behind you 100%. I can't in good conscience let them get away with this." Ebony sighed. "Let me think about it for a day or two. This is still fresh, and I'm angry. But we have to be strategic." She held Maxwell's hand. "I want them to be held accountable, but more importantly, I don't want to stoop to petty revenge. I just want a fair and respectful hiring process for everyone." Maxwell nodded. "I know you. You'll figure out the right thing to do. Meanwhile, if you need me to do anything, just say the word." Ebony smiled faintly. She was grateful for Maxwell's unwavering support. "For now, hold me," she whispered, feeling tears threaten to spill. He did, enveloping her in a comforting embrace as the Chicago skyline glowed in the windows behind them. A few weeks passed. Ebony tried to move on, pouring her energy into other job applications, volunteering with a local mentorship program for underprivileged girls and brainstorming personal marketing projects she could launch. Still, the memory of that interview lingered in her mind. One Friday afternoon, Ebony accompanied Maxwell to a high-profile networking event hosted by the Chicago Chamber of Commerce. It was the kind of gala that drew CEOs, philanthropists, and politicians, each boasting about their latest achievements. Ebony had attended many such events, both as Maxwell's partner and as a professional in her own right. But tonight, she was there mainly to support her husband, who was slated to give a short speech on Caldwell Industries' new sustainability initiative. Dressed in a sleek gold-embroidered black gown, Ebony looked every inch the poised and confident executive she truly was. She mingled with old acquaintances, occasionally meeting new ones. Suddenly, she spotted a familiar face across the room, Gregory Crane, the SVP of operations at Van Doren and Smith, the very man who had interviewed her. His silver hair and stiff posture were unmistakable. Next to him stood Bill Pierce, wearing a tailored tuxedo, his hair slicked back. Ebony felt her stomach tighten. Here they were, the same men who had mocked her capabilities and dismissed her potential. She could see them scanning the crowd, likely looking for valuable connections. Neither seemed to notice her at first. Just then, Maxwell, who had finished greeting a group of investors, came over. "Ebony, let me introduce you to someone," he began, but his words trailed off as he noticed Gregory and Bill. A look of realization and anger flashed across Maxwell's face, followed quickly by a calm facade. "What's wrong?" Ebony asked, though she already knew the answer. "That's them right," Maxwell said, keeping his voice low. Ebony nodded. Maxwell's jaw tightened. "I see. Well, the event is about to start, so I'll let you decide if you want to avoid them or not. But know that I won't just stand by if they approach you with any nonsense." Ebony inhaled deeply. "I'll be fine. Let's just get through this evening." As the night progressed, Ebony mingled with a few more guests, hoping to dodge a direct encounter with the Van Doren and Smith group. But fate had other plans. During the dinner portion, Ebony was seated at a round table next to Maxwell, across from a few local politicians. Halfway through the first course, she noticed Gregory and Bill walking around, greeting various tables. Before Ebony could look away, her eyes locked with Bill's. Recognition dawned on his face, and he nudged Gregory, who followed his gaze. They both froze for a moment, as if stunned to see Ebony at such a high-profile event, and seated next to Maxwell Richardson, no less. Ebony lifted her chin slightly, meeting their gazes with quiet composure. She wasn't going to shy away or slink into the background. This was a place where she had every right to be. Maxwell noticed the exchange. He turned and saw the men staring at Ebony with obvious confusion. Calmly, Maxwell stood buttoning his tuxedo jacket and walked toward Gregory and Bill Ebony, following just behind him. Gregory cleared his throat, forcing a diplomatic smile. "Mr. Richardson, it's an honor. I'm Gregory Crane from Van Doren and Smith. We've crossed paths a few times at industry summits. Pleasure to see you again." Maxwell nodded curtly. "Yes, I recall. And this is my wife, Ebony Daniels Richardson." At his words, Ebony stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. Bill's jaw dropped slightly, and Gregory's face flushed. A spark of recognition leaped between them. She was not just any candidate. She was the wife of a powerful CEO. "It's a pleasure to see you again," Ebony said, her tone carrying a subtle edge. Gregory stumbled over his words. Yes, we, met not long ago during a, process." Bill's face contorted into a strained grin, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of panic. "We had no idea, Ms. Daniels, Mrs. Richardson, that you were—" He trailed off, not sure how to finish. "Married to Maxwell Richardson?" Ebony said, arching an eyebrow. "Yes, well, I don't usually announce that when I apply for positions. I like to be evaluated on my own merits." Gregory's forced smile wavered. Of course. We absolutely respect that. We just— well, it was a surprise." Maxwell interjected, his tone icy. "I've heard from my wife about the kind of reception she received at Van Doren and Smith. It seems you and your team had quite a few issues with her qualifications and, shall we say, appearance." Both Gregory and Bill paled. The hum of conversation in the banquet hall seemed to intensify as their awkward silence grew noticeable. Ebony watched them squirm, a part of her feeling vindicated. She had nothing to prove to these men, but seeing their shock was undeniably satisfying. Gregory regained some composure. "Mr. Richardson, there must be some misunderstanding. We at Van Doren and Smith have the utmost respect for diversity and talent. Sometimes the hiring process is—" Ebony interrupted, her voice steady. "Let's be frank. It wasn't just about credentials. Your team made it clear they didn't view me as the right face for your refined brand. You questioned my look, my attitude, my background. That's not exactly a reflection of open-mindedness." Bill opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked helplessly at Gregory, who quickly tried to defuse the situation. "We certainly didn't mean to offend. We value every candidate." Perhaps there was a misunderstanding in tone, or Maxwell crossed his arms unimpressed. You might want to reevaluate how you treat top-tier applicants in the future. My wife is one of the smartest and most capable marketing experts I know. Your loss. With that, Maxwell turned to Ebony, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Let's go, honey. This conversation is over. They walked away, leaving Gregory and Bill standing there, stunned and sweating. Ebony's heart pounded, but she also felt a wave of relief. She had confronted them not as a victim, but as a person who refused to be belittled. The real storm, however, was still brewing, and the full force of karma was about to crash onto Van Doren and Smith. A few days after the gala, Ebony and Maxwell carried on with their lives. Ebony continued her job search, receiving multiple offers from other reputable companies that recognized her talent. She also did some consulting work for smaller businesses, helping them revamp their brand strategies and digital presence. Meanwhile, Maxwell stumbled upon troubling news. Van Doren and Smith was in the middle of a public relations nightmare. It started with an employee leak on social media, alleging systemic discrimination in the company's hiring practices. Someone claiming to be a former HR intern posted screenshots of internal emails that disparaged candidates' ethnicities, appearances, and age, labeling them as not brand appropriate. The allegations quickly caught fire on platforms like LinkedIn and Twitter. The hashtag #VanDorengate trended for days, with current and former employees sharing stories of racist, sexist, and ageist remarks. The scandal was relentless. Newspapers, online magazines, and TV stations picked up the story, interviewing past applicants who'd been rejected under suspicious circumstances. In the midst of this chaos, Ebony received a private message on LinkedIn from a woman named Simone White, the same intern who had leaked the emails. Simone had found Ebony's post, one Ebony had written about the need for workplace diversity, and recognized her name as someone who had been mistreated by the Van Doren and Smith HR team. In her message, Simone apologized for not speaking up sooner and thanked Ebony for her courage to walk out on them. Simone also offered to share more information if Ebony wanted to pursue legal action or speak to the press. Ebony hesitated. She didn't want to spend her energy in a long legal battle, especially not when she was moving forward in her career. But her moral compass told her that exposing corporate discrimination was essential to protect future candidates. After a thoughtful discussion with Maxwell, Ebony decided to give a brief statement to a local reporter covering the story. She spoke about her experience respectfully, without naming individuals, but making it clear that the system at Van Doren and Smith was flawed and biased. Within days, Ebony's statement was quoted in an article titled "Van Doren and Smith Under Fire for Corporate Discrimination." Although Ebony hadn't expected such widespread coverage, the media latched onto the irony. Ebony Daniels. Richardson, an accomplished black professional, had been thrown out of an interview by a luxury brand that didn't recognize she was the wife of a major CEO. Van Doren and Smith's top leadership, including their CEO Martin Chase, scrambled to control the damage. They launched an internal investigation, suspended key HR personnel, and released a public apology that rang hollow. Gregory Crane, Bill Pierce, and Christina Barnes were put on indefinite leave pending the outcome of the investigation. The story became a symbol of corporate racism and elitism, and Van Doren and Smith lost significant investor confidence. Stock prices dipped, high-profile clients announced boycotts, and the brand's once polished reputation took a severe hit. Days turned into weeks, and the storm showed no signs of quieting. PR consultants were called in, but each new revelation, like an internal memo, Urging employees to maintain a certain aesthetic fanned the flames. The entire company seemed to be on the brink of crisis. The fallout from the Van Doren and Smith scandal showed no signs of slowing. What began as a few leaked emails had turned into a corporate wildfire, one that scorched reputations, torched investor confidence, and laid bare the discriminatory practices festering beneath the luxury brand's polished image. Ebony watched it all unfold from a place of cautious distance. She hadn't set out to bring the company to its knees. Her only intention had been to stand up for herself. But the storm that followed employee testimonials, social media outrage, shareholder panic, was proof that her experience wasn't isolated. She had simply been the match in a room full of gasoline. And then came the call. Ebony had been working from her home office that morning, reviewing analytics for a client's product launch. Her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. Curious, she answered. "Hello, Ms." Daniels Richardson said, a voice that was firm but uncertain. "This is Martin Chase, CEO of Van Doren and Smith. I believe we need to speak." Ebony sat up straighter, her jaw tightening. "I'm not sure what there is to discuss, Mr. Chase," she replied coolly. There was a pause on the other end. "I understand your reluctance. I've read the reports, the interviews, and more importantly, I've heard firsthand what happened during your interview. I want to offer my deepest apologies, and I'd appreciate the opportunity to meet with you personally." Ebony was quiet. A part of her bristled at the sudden humility. Where was this energy when she'd been humiliated in that cold boardroom? "I appreciate the gesture," she said, "but an apology means little if it's just a PR tactic. You're calling because your brand is under fire, not because your conscience woke you up." Chase's voice softened. "You're right, but that doesn't mean we can't try to fix what's broken." Gregory Crane, Christina Barnes, Bill Pierce. None of them are with the company anymore. We've begun restructuring HR, re-evaluating hiring protocols and investing in external audits. But we need help, your help. I'd like to invite you to consult with us. Lead the change. Guide the new chapter. Ebony leaned back in her chair. The offer was tempting not because of the prestige, but because of the possibility of real impact. Still, the wounds were fresh. She needed more than words. "Before I even consider it," she said, "I'll need to see a concrete plan. Measurable benchmarks, accountability structures, and a genuine investment in building equity, not just a crisis response." "You'll have it," Chase said. "By the end of this week." Ebony ended the call with mixed emotions. She stared at the screen, her mind already spinning. This wasn't just an apology. It was an invitation to shape the very culture that once tried to exclude her. But she also knew better than to trust too quickly. That evening, she shared the news with Maxwell over dinner. He set down his glass and gave her a long, thoughtful look. "They're scared," he said. "And they should be. But this could be your chance to do something big, something lasting." Ebony nodded. "I want to do it, but on my terms. If I'm going to help them rebuild, it's going to be from the ground up. No fluff, no empty statements." Maxwell reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Then they're lucky to have you." 2 days later, a detailed proposal arrived in Ebony's inbox. It was titled, "Transformation, Blueprint, Equity, Accountability, Inclusion." It outlined timelines for restructuring training programs and outreach to underrepresented communities. It even included an independent council, where Ebony would have final say on inclusivity audits. Still, she didn't respond right away. Instead, she called former employees who had spoken out, reached out to Simone White, the intern whistleblower, and conducted her own quiet due diligence. Only when she felt satisfied that the effort was real did she agree to meet. The meeting with Chase was brief, professional, and direct. He listened more than he spoke a promising sign. Ebony didn't pull punches. "I'm not here to clean up your mess," she told him. "I'm here to ensure this company never again becomes a place where people are judged by anything other than their talent." Chase nodded solemnly. "We've failed in many ways. I won't pretend otherwise. But if you're willing to help us, I promise you this, your voice will not be a token. It will shape the future of Van Doren and Smith." And just like that, the balance of power had shifted. Ebony was no longer the woman shamed in a conference room. She was the one setting the agenda. News of her consulting appointment spread quickly, sparking debate. Some hailed her as a change maker, others accused the company of damage control. But Ebony stayed grounded. She wasn't doing this for the applause. She was doing it for the young woman who would one day sit where she sat and deserve to be treated with dignity. Her first week as consultant was intense. She led a candid town hall with employees, fielded raw, unfiltered feedback, and faced uncomfortable truths head-on. And she didn't shy away from tough conversations, especially with executives who had once thrived under the old culture. She looked them in the eye and reminded them, what you allowed to happen wasn't just wrong, it was dangerous. And it ends now. Bit by bit, change began, and this time it had a face, a name, and a voice strong enough to never be dismissed again. In the weeks following the scandal, Ebony's life took on a new rhythm, one filled with opportunity reflection and a deepening sense of purpose. The storm surrounding Van Doren and Smith was still raging in headlines and corporate circles, but for Ebony, it felt like sunrise after a long, bitter night. She had accepted a prestigious offer to become the senior vice president of marketing at a global retail brand known not just for its innovation, but for its genuine commitment to diversity. From her very first day, she was treated with the respect and recognition she had long earned, surrounded by a team that valued her insights and listened to her voice without prejudice. Yet one thread from the past still tugged at her Van Doren and Smith. Despite their humiliating treatment of her, the company had reached out again. This time, not with condescension, but with humility. After CEO Martin Chase had personally called and apologized, he'd followed through with a comprehensive plan, outlining how the company would rebuild. The document included timelines for HR reform inclusion, benchmarks, executive accountability, and outreach partnerships with minority institutions. It was, for the first time, more than just words. Ebony hesitated before accepting the consulting role. She discussed it extensively with Maxwell, weighing whether it was worth stepping back into a space that had once demeaned her so publicly. But ultimately, she made a powerful decision, not for revenge, but for change. "If I don't help them get it right," she told Maxwell one night, "then someone else might suffer what I went through. I can't let that happen. If they're serious about change, I want to make sure it's real." And so Ebony returned to Van Doren and Smith, not as a desperate candidate, but as a respected authority. Her role was clear: to overhaul the company's diversity and hiring practices, advise on marketing strategies that reflected real inclusion, and hold leadership accountable at every step. She led executive workshops, restructured mentorship programs, and worked closely with design teams to shift the company's branding away from elitist tropes and toward a message of broader elegance and universal accessibility. Some former critics were quick to comment. Online forums and business blogs buzzed with hot takes, some praising Ebony's courage, others questioning why she would work with a company that had wronged her. But Ebony met the criticism head-on during a live interview on Bloomberg Business News. People ask why I chose to work with Van Doren and Smith after everything she said, her tone calm and composed. The answer is simple. Real change requires stepping into broken spaces and fixing them from the inside. If I walked away, that wouldn't stop the problem. But if I stay, I can make sure what happened to me never happens to someone else. Her words reverberated across the corporate world. Leaders from other companies reached out, requesting her guidance on inclusive hiring. She became a sought-after voice on corporate equity panels and was featured on lists of top diversity changemakers. Within Van Doren and Smith, the transformation wasn't instant, but it was steady. Martin Chase, true to his word, implemented her recommendations. Former offenders like Gregory Crane, Christina Barnes, Bill Pierce and Sylvia were terminated, their reputations irreparably damaged by their roles in the scandal. Their fall from grace sent a resounding message to the entire company. Discrimination would no longer be ignored or tolerated. Ebony, however, never gloated. She didn't need to. Her presence, her influence, her leadership. These were her victories, and they were far more satisfying than revenge ever could be. In the months that followed, Caldwell Industries and Van Doren and Smith partnered to host a high-profile charity gala benefiting minority entrepreneurs. Ebony was asked to lead the event's creative direction. From concept to execution, she ensured it embodied empowerment and authenticity. On the night of the gala, the ballroom pulsed with energy. Entrepreneurs, corporate leaders, and activists filled the space, mingling beneath golden chandeliers. When Ebony took the stage to speak, the room fell silent. Change doesn't begin when the cameras roll or when the headlines shift, she began. Change begins when someone stands up and says, "This isn't right, and I won't stay silent." She spoke of her journey not as a tale of victimhood, but as a testament to resilience. Her voice carried through the hall, steady and proud. "We all have a choice," she said. "We can perpetuate systems that divide and diminish, or we can rebuild them stronger, fairer, better than before. I chose the latter. And I believe every company, every leader can do the same." Her speech drew a standing ovation. As she stepped off the stage, Maxwell greeted her with a proud smile and warm embrace. "You didn't just rise above it," he whispered. "You rewrote the ending." That night, as she looked around at the faces lit with hope, Ebony realized something. This was more than redemption. This was legacy. Ebony's story is a reminder that confidence and integrity shine brightest when challenged by prejudice. Through her unwavering resolve, she not only exposed injustice, but also paved the way for meaningful reforms at Van Doren and Smith. Her triumph illustrates how perseverance and courage can transform even the darkest experiences into opportunities for growth and progress. If this story moved you, if you believe in standing up for what's right and breaking the chains of discrimination, please show your support. Like this video, share it with friends and family who might find inspiration in Ebony's journey, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience and empowerment. Together we can spread messages that encourage respect, unity, and the pursuit of justice in every corner of society. Thank you for listening and for being part of this conversation.